another Light It Up webinar. Today's guest is extremely special to John and I. He is Josh Barker. You probably have heard of him, and if you haven't, he is a absolute savage, and he's based out of the Redding, California marketplace. Josh is a seasoned veteran, and he went from really being a top producing listing machine on his own to retiring for a year and a half, coming back with a little bit of a different twist and focusing on building a highly productive team and truly building the people within the organization to become the best producing agents they possibly can be in the marketplace. Josh, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, John. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so
and
much.
Josh, I know that your story is a unique one. And for the people that don't know you, can you give like a little bit of an overview of your career to where you are right now?
Sure. Yeah, I've been in the business for 23 years. Started off obviously as a single agent, grew a really small team that towards the end of my selling career, we had about 9 agents or so on that team. I was one of those. We were selling about 800 units at a time with that team. I was heavily in production. I would have described it as a highly leveraged producers model. And that structure is a lot different than when you're talking about team building, I think along the lines of what we're going to discuss today. I was able to put away enough financial provisions to retire from sales, which I did. The celebration was pretty much a sailboat and a trip, really a year and a half long trip of sailing with my family. And then we came back, had a little baby girl that we adopted, and she's one of 4 kids that I have. And that put me back in the decision of, okay, well, I'm 47 years old. I've got to decide what I want to do in this next season. And I felt real estate was a good space to do it. So my wife and I discussed some outline of how that would go. And she thankfully agreed that I could build a company again, as long as I wasn't the center cog in that company anymore. And so that's been a great journey for me the last year and a half or so. We launched the company in July of 2021. And we are now a company where I am out of production, and we've developed a sales team and a leadership team, and it's a really rewarding work.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
When we shadowed you 6 months ago, it's crazy because Josh, you make it look so easy because of the skills that you've developed and everything that you had, but it's a lot of work, and it's definitely not for everybody to do. And there's a lot of key factors and functions that you need in place. Can you give a little bit of a high level overview in terms of what you actually need in place and what skills you need to develop as a leader to be able to grow a team? Because from going from an agent to an entrepreneur, that's a shift that's not familiar for a lot of people.
Yes, it is. I think that's a really good point to bring up. When you're a single agent, most of your focus is around yourself, and it's focused around what activities you yourself can do to be productive and to be profitable. Then there's that next seasonal change where you might hire an assistant or two, and now there's this collaboration that has to take place between you and another individual in order to facilitate services to the market. And so now there's a skill set that you have to develop, which is to how to set proper expectations, how to coach, train, mentor, develop, how to set clear expectations, hold people accountable, and that's a learning curve that you have to go through too. And I think people, there's probably a lot of people watching this now that are maybe in that season where they have a few people around them. Then there's that higher level producers model I was talking about, where you're highly leveraged. But the difference in that model and what we're doing today is that in that leadership style, you're really trying to find a way to build these processes where all the things that are not the most important thing are being done by somebody else. And again, it comes with coaching and training and development and accountability and building a good team, setting very clear expectations. But in that model I'm describing, you are still a center cog. And so you're still heavily in production, and you've kind of designed your system and your process to complement that. And then you have the season I'm in now where the leader's out of production. And so you're developing a sales team. You've got an administrative team, you've got a leadership team. And the leadership piece is a big challenge. It's probably the most rewarding part of it. Because, how do you have a positive impact on human behavior? How do you put inputs into a scenario and have the outputs be what you were intending? And it comes with patience, comes with humility, it comes with consistency, it comes with a lot of the books we've read about being clear on your vision, your mission, your plan, and how you're going to execute, and being able to clearly give that information in a way that people can receive it. Because if they can't see your vision, it's going to be hard for you to lead.
Yeah. No, that's very true.
And Josh, when you were doing 800 units as a listing agent, in your old model, how many of those were actually coming from listings? How many of those? I was going on a little over 400 appointments a year personally, and I was listing in the 300s in terms of homes listed, and I was closing in the high 280s personally. My sales team at that time did a lot of the buyer side of that business, because we were split about 50-50, about 400 transactions listings sold, 400 buyer sales, which I believe is a good way to do it if you can. Sure.
And the buyer side, those agents did most of those other transactions were buyer related or related to the listing agent, the agent having a relationship with the seller, where it was like one of their buyers selling their home, a relative, a friend, or something like that. Most of all the competitive, if you will, interviews I was going on.
Yeah,
got it.
I think it's important to note that, because when you take yourself out of production and you're trying to replace yourself, it wasn't as if you were making up 100 of those 800 transactions. You were making up,
Oh, it was a significant amount.
40%.
Yeah, it was a lot, and I knew it was a problem back then in terms of making that transition to a company like we have today. I had talked to one of my mentors that's been my mentor for over 20 years, and I said, it might be easier just to break this thing than it would be to try to modify it, because that company at that time was built around me being that cog, and now I'm about to pull myself out, which is obviously going to create a big disruption. And I figured at that point when I did retire, I thought, well, if I do come back, which I wasn't convinced I would, but if I did come back, I thought it would actually be easier to rebuild it from scratch than it would be to have to make that transition. And I'm not here to endorse that, by the way, because it's not a way to go, but it's what I did. The thing you'd have to evaluate, John, I think, is your cost to sell, because if another agent would have went on those appointments that I was going on, there would have been an expense to the company, a cost to sale expense there, or a cost of goods sold, depending on how you want to classify it. But that number would have shown up there. And then the conversion rate, of course. So would that other person or people be able to convert at the same level I was? Because if they were, then the appointment generating side would be about the same. If it wasn't, then I knew I'd have to address for that. So those are things you'd have to factor in: cost of sale and conversion rate, if you're going to be, moving yourself out of production.
Yeah. So if someone was a solo agent that wants to produce a team, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first thing you need to start off with is 1, integrity, 2, vision. So that way you can create a picture and have people want to actually ride it in that, boat with you. What's the first phase of what they would need to start building out a team, if starting from solo to trying to build it out?
I think first of all, you have to have something of value. Because it's really hard to inspire people around you to come join you if you don't have something of value for them. So I think you'd have to first recognize, like for me, in my example I gave earlier, me bringing in I think our first hire was a closing manager, and for obvious reasons, I didn't want to spend all my time doing the paperwork when I should be out trying to help people buy or sell a home. And so I had value to offer, which was a paycheck and some consistency with me sending them files all the time. That the value exchange was a job. When I brought in a buyer's agent, that first hire for a buyer's agent, it was, we have this X amount of opportunities on the buyer side, and I wasn't personally servicing them, so I had this opportunity that was available to somebody, and for those reasons, I was able to bring in a buyer's agent, and it kind of grew from there. But in both cases, if I didn't have anything of value, it would have been really hard to convince people to come over.
Yeah. I think one of the things too is also having you as a mentor. For instance, when we were shadowing you, one of your agents was doing over 100, and I think it was like 120 sales individually. And you're like, I'm going to train you until you could do like 200 or two something, because I've done that, and I'll train you to do the same thing. So that's like having that mentorship is a huge value too. Yeah.
If they want,
if they choose.
Yeah. The unsexy thing about what I was doing before is that you have to have a personality that thrives off of that. And I've made the mistake of trying to superimpose my own energy and my own way of seeing things on other people, and I find that to not be very effective. So you might be better to find out what they want first.
I mean, I was picturing myself in that position, and it's like you were saying, the conversion's not going to be the same. And that's got to be a frustrating part of huge frustrating part of the process, when there have to be situations where you look down and you say, hey, if I had gone on that appointment, I probably would have gotten it, or maybe I would have closed a little bit harder, or I know that area better than anybody else, and I think I would have nailed that one. And that's just got to be something that you have to be comfortable with.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I would say that, I mean, not that all of us haven't experienced that thought from time to time, but that is not a big thinking thought. Really, there's a bigger symptom, or you're not identifying, not that you said that, John, but I think that when I see that situation happen, I would say I'm not identifying the right problem. And getting really clear on the right problem that needs to be solved is really what would need to be done, because it almost like gets you off the hook if you were to say, well, I could have done better. Well,
sure.
Then why didn't they do better? And what's missing from our system and our process and our training that we could help to make that conversion rate improve as a result? And I think by looking at like that, it's probably more proactive, because I do think there's tug of war, John, to your point. I see tug of war a lot in sales teams where the team leader, if you will give up because they basically think, oh, everybody sucks, nobody can do it, whatever, fill in the blank for whatever excuse they're going to fill in it with. When in reality, what it was is they weren't prepared to do what would need to be done to get the outcomes they were looking for.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that when those situations arise, you have to sort of put it back on yourself and say, what could I have done better to prepare my ISA for a better pre-qual? What could I have done better to prepare the listing agent, to improve their conversion rate?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the power is in you accepting the responsibility. Ultimately, a lot more can get done when it's your problem to solve than if you put it on somebody else's desk. Right.
100%.
So I think that's, I think there's some mindset to that. I think you've got to develop it, and I don't think we're all born with it right away. I think it's just one of those things where you're like, well, wait a minute, complaining about it's not going to solve a thing. So let's look at really what the real issue is. Let's see if we can come up with some good solutions that seem to make sense. Let's execute.
Yeah. I was talking to Chase about this yesterday. Chase Ames from Utah, for anybody who's watching. The one thing that is amazing dude too. One thing that we were talking about, and it almost hit, is you do a very good job of being able to wear two different hats and have defined times when you're wearing them, where you can look at the business at 30,000 feet, and then you could be an integrator in the business in a heartbeat, and then revert back. So you could be Tom Brady and you could be Bill Belichick all in the same day, and you do that very, very well, where you can react in a logical sense instead of an emotional reaction. Like, why aren't they converting this? It has to be something else in there. And that's errors that we, like John and I, have experienced, and we hated that because it's so hard to not get emotionally attached when you're not getting the outcomes that you feel like if you were in charge you would get.
You're spending money in a lot of cases too. So and you're seeing real money going out, but you're not seeing the return on that money coming back in. And the frustration is real. But I think the process of problem solving it is, I think, what differentiates certain teams that are doing well from others.
Yeah. What advice would you give to someone who needs to learn how to grow that muscle and develop that problem solving skill? If they,
I think the first step is accepting responsibility. Yeah, I think the first step is accepting responsibility for everything that's happening, in your team, in the organization. And as soon as you accept the responsibility for it, you can't solve every problem all at the same time. I constantly am quoted for saying things like, well, I think that is an excellent point, and I think that we need to do it. And I can't wait until it's the most important thing that I've got to get done. But there's probably 3 other things that I need to get done before we can get to that one, and I think being able to recognize, like I said, that the right problem, and making sure it's the right problem to be working on at that time, because there's a lot of issues in all of our companies, but the order in which they get solved is up to the leader to figure out, because there is an order that makes the most sense. There's an order that will move that needle forward in the right direction consistently. And I think it's important you take the time to figure that out.
I think, Kiro, it makes sense for us to just take a step back for a second, because you and I both know Josh really well. We've spent time shadowing him and spent time interrogating him. When we spend enough time in his office, we're sitting there like, Josh, what about this? What about that? But I think it makes sense just real quick to explain. So Josh's old model, again, was a high producing listing agent. He was going on, the majority of the listing appointments, coming back, literally handing the signed contract to a listing manager. Listing manager was getting the property on the market. And Josh was, spending the majority of his time prospecting and going on appointments, right? So when you pulled yourself out of that role, that's not just one person, of course, right? So you were replaced by ISAs and listing agents. Can you talk to us a little bit more about maybe like how your work chart looks now? Just because I think a lot of people on this call are saying, all right, well, when I pull myself out, how many people are replacing me, and what are their tasks and what are their duties?
Mm-hmm. So it's a good question. So it took about 3.5 listing agents to replace my previous production. And it goes back to the point I was making earlier, Kiro, where not everybody wants to be running that hard. And quite honestly, unless you're the owner of the company, running that hard is probably at a pretty big risk to your clients. And what I mean when I say that is that I really cared a lot about the services our clients were receiving. And I'm not saying our agents won't, but it's not their name on that sign. Our agents, it's not their name on that real estate sign. It's not them that's going to get the customer complaint. It's not them that's going to have to solve a legal issue. It's me. And so when I was in production at that volume, even though I was that busy, I was that careful to make sure we were doing a great job. And if you ask your agents to run that hard without the ownership component to it, it's that you're putting your clients at risk, which ultimately puts your company at risk. So I think finding that volume that makes sense to them too. I mean, our agents doing 100, 150 on the listing side, I think when they're doing it the right way, I think they're happy. I also think it's a healthy thing for the company. Now, if somebody wants to do 250, provided that they're not compromising ethics and values and service and those things, I'll coach you as far as you can go. But if I start to see the wheels come off, we're going to make sure to shore those issues up before we let you run any further. And that's a style that I have, I suppose, that may be different than some, but we're not a turn or burn company when it comes to that kind of stuff.
And I guess
the second part of that was with the ISAs. So I could have just a few conversations and set an appointment before, where now those conversations are going to take more. And so leveraging out ISAs, that creates the consistency and lead generation for the company. Most of our agents are going out on qualified listing appointments, our listing team anyway, that are set by the company. And so the company's doing marketing and promotion. They're following up on hot prospects. They're doing proactive prospecting outbound. We're getting a lot of inbound calls and inquiries because of the service component I spoke of earlier. And so all that collectively is what's causing those appointments to be set. And that was something we had to put in place when I came out of production.
Also, I think one thing that go on that's pretty important too is the core values. Because when John and I first took an EOS course and they were talking about core values, John was like, what's this silly thing? Why do we got to do core values? But then once we read the book Rocket Fuel, No, yeah, okay, I recall perfectly. But then when we read the book Rocket Fuel, John was just like, oh, that makes a lot more sense because that's the standards in which you hold everybody by, you hire and fire based off of that.
Yeah.
Can you share how that works for you guys?
Well, I mean, on the wall behind me here, we won't be able to see it entirely, but right here, that's our core values, and those are posted around the company, in various locations, so that people are constantly reminded of what those values are.
Yeah.
I'm going to borrow from somebody smart that said this, and I don't know who it was anymore, but and I believe it to be true, which is I think that most people do hire and fire to their core values. So, for example, you like a person, but you can't figure out why. It might be this intrinsic connection with core values that you're experiencing. The same thing is true of somebody that you just despise and you can't wait to get out of your company, and that would be someone that's probably violating all those core values. So even if you haven't been able to get them memorialized on a piece of paper, they probably exist. But what's the benefit is of bringing them to a piece of paper and then ultimately, to different visuals throughout your company, is that you are helping your company recognize them easily as well. And so people come into our company now through our team frequently because they're recognizing core values and other people they think would be a good fit for us. And then on the same side, it's true that if there was somebody that was getting off the rails a little bit and violating these core values, I think the agents would be able to recognize it faster also. And then it escalates through the company, through our president's club, and ultimately to the leadership team. So we start to see stuff because the agents bring it to us. And so that's the benefit, I think, of having it. We use a people's analyzer. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but we find ourselves doing that, not as a regular tool that we do frequently, but let's say I have an issue with somebody and we're really trying to get to the bottom of the issue. We'll use a people analyzer to do it. So just kind of imagine all these rows of core values and then insert the name of the agent, and we start rating them across those core values to see how they stack up against other people on the team, or what areas that we really have the issue. It kind of brings some clarity to us as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a game changer. When we did it during the analyzers, essentially you write the core values and you do a plus or minus. And if you ever get a minus for someone, they're not a fit for your organization whatsoever.
Yep.
If it's a plus minus, it's something that you need to be cautious about. But then the leadership team analyzes themselves in the beginning, because that's where it starts from. That's just the EOS process that was shared with us. That was of value.
I remember we went through the process and we rated all of our leadership team in person in front of each other. It was always interesting to tell people, like one of our core values is coachable, and I gave somebody in the room a minus, and they didn't really take it too well. But it's it's interesting, but everybody has to be open-minded and willing to take the criticism, and it makes everybody a lot stronger at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's a
looking back
thing to do too.
Yeah, but looking back at it, she should have been fired a long time ago. Like, we shouldn't have even kept her that long, because she wasn't the kind of person that would fully want to understand the task at hand. She would just robotically do it just to get it out of the way.
How did you know exactly who I was talking about?
It's telepathy,
but it's a good exercise all around.
It's good.
One of the questions that came in was, what is a common mistake that you see teams make, and how can someone who's developing a new team avoid them?
I think the most common mistake that teams make is they don't set really good expectations during the selection process. I think it's probably one of the most common mistakes I see in teams. And what I mean by that is that if you're in a recruiting environment, you're calling agents, and agents accept your interview invitation, you go and you sit down with them, and you have a discussion about your company, and then you ask them questions about what they're wanting to accomplish and what their personal goals are. And in that process, if you're not getting to the issue of what they want to accomplish and ensuring that what you have to offer is going to provide a solution for what it is they want to accomplish, then you may not have alignment there. And it's kind of a tricky interview, because real estate agents are, as most of you already know, that have done any recruiting. A lot of agents are accustomed to interviewing the broker for the job. Like, well, I've got 15 people who are all offering me 110% split. How big of a check do you want to write me, basically, right? And so you've got to, obviously in the first interview, we use a two-step process, but in our first interview, we talk to, our system and our process and what the agents wanting to accomplish, what's important to them. One of the things that I would want to mention is you need to know what they want to make, what they want to earn. And the reason why is because if their financial goals are far less than your minimum standard, they're probably going to reach their goals and be pretty satisfied long before they reach the goals of the company. And now there's going to be this area of conflict between you and this agent. They're not working so hard. I don't get it. I mean, why aren't they working the leads? Well, because they made their mortgage payment. They're happy now. That they're a 2-deal person a month. That's all you're going to get. Or they're a 3-deal person a month. That's all you're going to get. Or they're 1 deal every other month person. That's all you're going to get. So I think getting clear on that. And then the second piece of that is being very forthright, maybe not in your exact core process, but on what the expectations would be when they join their team. They need to know, what does a day in the life of your company look like? What will be expected of them? What could they expect from people around them? Do your very best to describe how it could feel, what it's going to be like, and really dig deep to see if there's any examples where they've had anything like that in their life before. Because if you bring the wrong people in, they're not staying very long. And turnover is probably by far the most expensive thing that all teams have to endure.
Do you have them come in firsthand? And
no, I won't have them come in firsthand, but I do my very, very best to, and I'm not a part of that first interview. And then I'm occasionally a part of the second one. I'd say about 50-50 on the second one personally. Even my sales manager is extremely clear on what the expectations are. If somebody came in this building and they didn't know what to expect, I would apologize for that. I would not be happy. They're making a really big decision too. They're disrupting their previous employment. They're telling their clients how excited they are for this new opportunity. And if we bring them into our building and they fail, that's a huge blemish on us as well.
Yeah. Just to go deep in there for like an example, I've personally experienced it. I know John has too. Where you bring in a new agent and you're like, yeah, it's going to be great. You're going to get leads, this, that, and the other, but you don't talk about how many contacts they're going to have to make, how it's going to be like following up with people, and how they're going to have to develop their cadence with the numbers and stuff like that. The 3-2-1, implementing all those things. And then when they get in there and you're like, come on, hit the phones. They're like, well, I don't want to hit the phones. I'm too scared. Then you didn't manage
I
it
thought
right.
I was just going to have people come in and say they wanted me to write the offer for them. It's like, no, sorry, COVID's over. Yeah.
And it goes back to you being able to do a really good job of going 30,000 feet and treating the company as a different organism of what's best for the company versus, I like this person, I want to keep them, but it's not what's best for the company. And we learned this from you. We were doing SOPs, which is standard operating procedures, completely wrong until you were nice enough to share it in a mastermind in terms of how an SOP is properly used. And I think that's a big mistake, or common mistake people make too. Can you share how an SOP works and how you actually maximize its efficiency and effectiveness?
Without getting too analytical, I'll be as broad stroke as I can be on that question, because I mean now you're talking dirty to me because I like SOPs quite a bit. But generally speaking, this goes back to an earlier part of our conversation where SOPs are typically derived out of mistakes. And so, the first thing to do is that, you find a system or a process that's not working well. And maybe it's not even a system or process, maybe something you do and it just doesn't work well. And then you have to get in there and identify the real problem. But once you've identified what the real problem is and you've come up with what you believe to be the very best solution for it, and it's been tested, it needs to get documented as an SOP and a standard operating procedure. And then that process then needs to be disseminated against anybody that's going to be engaged in that process, so that they're fully aware of what that process and expectation is going forward. And when it comes to implementation within a group, Obviously, it's on us to make sure that they understand that the SOP does exist, and what's the proper way to interpret that SOP. And at that point, when the questions come after that, the first response should be is to, let's have you check the SOP. And after you've done that, I'd like you to come back and let me know if you still have any questions. And so you can train them to get used to actually using the SOP. It's funny. I was on the Bowfin, which is a submarine in Oahu this last Christmas. And my son and I were down there, and I was looking at their standing operating procedures that were printed out in 1942. And it said things like, put bomb in tube. And you would think that was assumed, but apparently it probably wasn't. And so it made the SOP, right? So I think that that's another thing about SOPs is that we have to break it down to the extent that any reasonable person in your team would clearly be able to understand what it is the task is and how to do it right.
Who was it, who coined the phrase IKEA instructions? Somebody was telling us that when you prepare the SOP for your team. So just to, again, take a step back, because I know there's some people on this call that probably don't deal with SOPs every day. Anytime that there's a process in your system, in your team, that you find yourself doing over and over again, document the process. We call it an SOP, standard operating procedure, like how to input a new listing into the MLS. So that the listing manager is out that day, somebody else can, like Josh said, it gets done, somebody else can step into that position. We always say it should be written like IKEA instructions. Like anybody should be able to pick it up and just be able to go step by step.
And our SOPs on those types of processes, we refer to them more as checklists. So like when we take set an appointment, there's a new appointment checklist. The listing's taken, a new listing checklist. Price reduction on a home, price reduction checklist. Offer accepted checklist. New escrow checklist, right? And so all we have to do is start training our team on those checklists now at this point. And it decreases the mistakes that are made. It brings clarity to the job and the description of the job. And I think everything runs a lot better when it's documented. And so if you came into our company, every process is documented. You would know that there's a checklist available to you that, you won't be lost for long as you look at the checklist.
Yeah. And it also allows you to deliver the same experience to each client.
It does. It standardizes the experience, at least the minimum standard of the experience. I think human beings are the ones that bring the ultimate experience to the customer. So, but it certainly provides the minimum standards of the company. And then it provides some flexibility for the person to be a human and connect with other people.
I think one of the biggest things that helped that you shared with us is that the SOP is almost a living document. And when you have those meetings between groups that almost intertwine together, that constantly make provisions and edits in there, in my mind, I was like, oh, you said it and forget it, you're done. But then after that, it becomes, something that no one ever looks at it again. But constantly having it in front of them upgrades your systems and procedures so the company's way of operating stays the same from that point on moving forward, which is great.
There's problems that'll break down. A process will change. A legal component of a process might be impacted by state law or something. And we have to go in there and, not only do we have to make a decision on how we're going to make that adjustment, but we have to communicate that adjustment to everyone that's involved. And so it's a living document. It doesn't have to be static. And that's one of the strategic advantages of smaller companies is that, and don't cash in, don't waste that opportunity, which is we can be somewhat flexible in comparison to a very rigid, monolithic company. You know what I mean? So I'm glad I'm not Microsoft. If I wanted to be, I'd go work there. No offense to Microsoft, but I know what their limitations are. Not very much longer since they're so closely related to ChatGPT, but I think they'll be doing very well soon. But being maneuverable in a smaller company, use that to your advantage. But it all comes down to communication.
Yeah. One of the questions that came in is what skills, and I think I asked it in a different variation, what skills does the leader need to develop to become a successful team leader? And I know we said the communication skills is one that's important, and problem solving. Is there any additional skills that you would add on to that?
Well, I mean, I kind of, not that I'm a CEO in the comparison to real CEOs that run major corporations, but I mean, I'm a CEO for my company. So I think that being able to identify the most important thing for the company to be working on, and even beyond that, to be able to identify the most important things to be working on in each department, being able to clearly communicate that to a leadership team, being able to make sure that that's being disseminated against anybody that participates in our company's operations. I think that those are some really big things that you would want to learn how to do if you're not doing it already, at the highest level, because I think we tend to major in the minors on accident, and that's not going to get us ahead. You know, I can who said this, CEO for Disney years ago, he says, I could come up with the very best tuba oil on the planet, but the market for tuba oil is pretty small. So let's make sure we're focusing on a problem that's big enough that solving it will greatly have a positive impact on your company.
Yeah, that's great. And then this certain,
go ahead, Gary.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say another question came in on customer service.
Go ahead.
So we have a system for customer service, and we use, I think everybody's using it at this point, but we've been using it for a really long time. We got it from a book years ago. I can't remember. I wish I could give credit to the right person, but what we do is we rate our service on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being highly likely. How likely is it that you'll continue to refer your friends and family to our company? We rate our services in 3 different areas in a transaction. One's right after it's listed, one's while we're in escrow after the inspections are done, and the final one is right at closing, or right after close. And we have a company policy that anytime the rating on any one of those situations is less than a 9, the transaction manager involved, the agent involved, and the leadership team are all notified. And what that does is it allows us to go in and identify, was this a human issue? Was it a process issue? And how are we going to resolve this issue? And I can tell you that we review those on a monthly basis to see from the previous month how many of those we might have had that were less than a 9. I think last month, if I had to guess, we had like 4. And, none of them were terrible, but let's say they gave us an 8 or a 7 on 4 out of the 60 closings. I would say, okay, is there an agent in common? Is there a transaction manager in common? Is it a process? And so that way, we solve the issue of the day it happens, but then we also, at the end of a month, we're looking for trends. Is there something bigger going on here? Again, we're trying to identify the right problem. And that's been a very, very good tool for us. Right now, we're averaging a 9.6, which I consider to be a huge accomplishment. A 9.6 on our rating right now for our company. And so we measure it all the time. It's something that's a big, big piece of who we are and what we do.
Wow, that's amazing. Was that from the Rockefeller Habits?
The Rockefeller Habits, I think, would endorse that, but that's not where this book that I'm speaking of, it was separate from that book.
Got it.
And it was super early on, because we've been doing that, I think, for darn near 10 years. It's been a really long time. And as soon as I saw that book and I read that, I was like, it was so consistent with, how much we care about service, that it was a big thing for us to implement right away. Oh, and we have it done. It's not a request by email, by the way. So those of you guys who are listening, I get this like, I've been doing it, but nobody responds. It's like we call them a thing called a telephone. You push a couple of digits, the phone rings, and they answer it. And we ask them. And so, because you're not going to get the same response from a survey that you email out or text out.
Yeah. And one of the questions that was asked was, in a shifting market like the one that we're experiencing now, people have 2 options, and there's a lot of people who will preach just go recruit like crazy, and then the odds are that people will join in, your transactions will increase, and the other ones are like just either cut down on expenses and try to focus in on like a niche. What is your thought on that?
It's hard, because I know people that are in that space who would give you that answer, and I respect them. I think they're well-intended. I disagree in terms of the mass recruiting. And my opinion's worth nothing. But that's my opinion. The reason why I disagree is because I think it has a negative impact on culture to recruit at a high level like that.
Yeah.
I think it could also have a negative impact on the people you bring in and then you immediately push out because you fail to take the time to select properly. And there's a disruption in other people's lives with that way of doing it. And I know that all the gurus are going to tell me I'm wrong, and that's fine. They're right, and I'm sure they're right. I'll just tell them now they're right. But for me, I would never do that. And that, if I'm going to bring in an agent, we're going to have a discussion about what our company's about. We're going to talk about what the expectations are. We're going to really make sure in our mind, and we'll never know for sure. We understand that, but we are really not going to bring somebody in just to try them out. We're just not going to do it. And I don't think that there's too many teams on the planet that are that big that they have to approach it that way. You know what I mean? I just don't see these. You could have 50 agent sales team. You don't have to approach it that way. And it leads into a bigger topic of mine that concerns me, is that per agent productivity, I think, should be a primary concern for a leader. I see these teams running around with 50, 60 agents in them, and they're doing 400 or 500 deals a year, and they're, on the stage and all that. And they're probably profitable. I'm not questioning that they're profitable, but are their agents profitable? Can their agents have a career full time in your organization based on that per agent productivity? And I could never be okay with that. Our agents, we want them, the ones that choose to be part of our JB Pro, which is our actual sales team with high level of accountability. If you choose to be a part of that, I'm assuming that you want to be a full-time real estate agent with a career in real estate, and your per agent productivity should be able to equal a mortgage, a rental property, a car, some college tuition for some kids. And I think of all of those things as being my responsibility.
Yeah. That's big.
And again, I there's other ways to do it, but that's how we see it. That's who we are.
Yeah. I love that. What are some resources? I know in the past, because everything that you have in terms of leadership is, one, from experience, two, you've educated yourself above and beyond to be able to deliver the value that you do to your team and everyone else. What are some resources, and what should people try to do or be around to be able to develop that skill?
Exposure, man.
Leadership skill.
Just exposure. You guys are a perfect example of what agents should be doing, which is connecting with other people that are participating and getting better every day. There's a vein in real estate that's super exciting, which is why I'm reluctant to make the comment I made just a minute ago, because I think that those same people also have some incredible value that they bring to the table all the time. And so I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater and those kind of comments. I think that we should all be throwing out different thoughts and ideas. I think we should be all rigorously challenging each other through those thoughts and ideas. And I think that at the end of the day, we're all going to be better because of it. And so I would encourage everybody, you never know where your next good idea is going to come from. I would give every agent 5 minutes. I really would. Maybe not 25 minutes, but I would give every agent 5 minutes, right? Because you never know. You never know what you might be able to do to have a positive impact on that person, and vice versa too. And I goes down to the brand new agent right in the business. They're excited and full of energy. They have great ideas too. They need to be heard as much as anybody else. Maybe not as long.
Josh, what percentage of the new hires agent wise are brand new agents? What are you getting some more experienced people? Are you getting people that are, sort of stuck at 10 deals and you could get them to 30 deals? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, you're talking to a company that's a year and 9 months old, I think, at this point, right? So when we launched, I brought back, I think 4 of the 13 agents I hired were people that were with my company before. And again, I was a small little company before. So that was like half my sales team. And then other agents, most of them were new, not brand new, but new, like within the last 6 or 8 months. Most of them were with a company that was that internet broker kind of experience. And so, they weren't getting too much from that experience. And so I had something to offer them, but it was tough, man. I came back when the market was red hot. And so we brought them in, start coaching and training, recognized fairly quickly that a few of them was probably a little too hasty in our hiring process. Came alongside of them once we had our system and process in place, and gave them an opportunity to get coached up or coached out. And once I felt like we were delivering as a company, but they weren't able to deliver as an agent, that's when we felt comfortable saying, you might want to look at other options for real estate, right? I say all that because now I don't know if you could get in my company being a new agent anymore. And the reason why is that our bench now is about 15 agents long, meaning I've got about 15 people outside our building today that would like to join us if I were to open up a space. And so obviously when you have that type of demand, you get to be more selective on what they bring to the overall team. And so I wouldn't go as far as to say I won't hire a new agent, because I would. But boy, you'd be at a disadvantage compared to some of the other people out there that have already demonstrated a high level of ability. So be ready to present.
When you bring on agents from other teams or other brokerages, is it difficult to instill your company, your core values? Maybe not so much core values, but the company policies. Because I find, a lot of times when people are trying to recruit a new agent, they may not have had to report their number of contacts. They may not have had to go on a set number of appointments each week. And I'm sure your minimum standards are set in stone. So I find that a lot of people struggle with that level of accountability.
Again, because of the expectations that we set during the selection process, we don't hear about that quite as much. I haven't had an agent come in the last 8 months, let's say, that said, "Oh, I really didn't realize you really did this."
Yeah.
I mean, they knew up front what we would be expecting. We also were very clear, like, we're not messing around when we say this. Like, we really do this. So be sure
that the rumors are true.
The rumors are true. Yeah. And I think that's the reason why we haven't had that issue. Now, all agents have a problem tracking their numbers, though. So I don't want to go to the extent of like all of our agents are robots. Everything's perfect every time. No, it's not like that. But I have permission to hold them accountable because we had this agreement up front. We discussed it up front. We both set expectations for each other up front. You gave me permission to hold you accountable. And because I care for you, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to do what I said I would do.
I would actually probably phrase that a different way. My question initially, I would say, now that I've thought about it, I'm thinking a lot more agents probably come to you for that extra accountability. Almost like, why I don't go to the gym by myself and I hire a personal trainer, right? Because I want that pressure. I want that regimen, that schedule, that direction.
Yeah. In the beginning, nobody wanted it. I mean, that was the rumor mill for my team that didn't come with me. So the 4 that came back, they were ready for it. They knew what they were going to get when they came in the door. The other 4 didn't come back because of the accountability. They're like, hell no, I don't want any of that anymore. I think I'm happy with my whatever. Right. And which is cool. I'm glad they made that decision for themselves. But the rumors were true. They knew that, they knew that was going to be a part of this whole thing. It's made it really easy for us to have honest conversations with people. Right now, I think the recruiting's got easier because the market contracted. In our market, our sales went down by about 40%. And what that did to our company, because we grew through the contraction, we've moved into that #1 spot as a real estate office, not a team, not an agent, but a company in our market with a fraction of the agents that are in the competing offices. And so I think that in itself, the agents are going, there's a formula there. Something's going on because they've got, 18 people and we've got 100 and they're outselling us. And it's really comes down to culture. larger real estate companies are going to be at a huge challenge right now, because even if a franchise type of company wanted to change their business model today, they would likely have to release most of the people in their company, because their culture has been built around people being flexible, independent contractor minded, do what you want, when you want, how you want, please don't leave. And a lot of other, things in their culture that's made it hard. And if they wanted to get competitive, they would have to change things inside of their companies to do that. And that means that most of those agents would be leaving, and they would have to go through the painstaking process of selecting properly, building a culture, and all that.
Yeah. Josh, so I'm looking at the time here. We got one question from Caroline.
Yep. Well, we have two. So Richard Berman, shout out. He's asking, Power of Moments book, ? Is that a book that you'd recommend?
Or what?
Power of Moments.
I think he had written that, Kiro, when Josh was struggling to remember the name of that book, the customer service book. Was it Power of Moments?
No, that's not the book.
No.
All right. Sorry about that, Richard.
I got it. It just came to me. The name of the book is called The Most Important Question.
All right.
The Most Important Question. Beautiful.
If I know Kiro well enough, he's already bought 10 copies.
Yes. Next question is from Caroline Issa. Shout out, Caroline. She says, how are you able to do 400 listing appointments in the beginning of your career? Marketing, ? Cold calls, ads, letters. I'm sure it's a mixture, but curious to know if you believe in the most effective way to generate business. Farming expireds for sell-by owners. That's verbatim what she asked.
That's cool. So I didn't do 400 listing appointments in the beginning of my career. That's what I'm laughing at. I'm like, that was like that's at year 18, 19. Where 50% of my business was coming from past clients and center of influence referring business to me. I only had to go out and find the other 50% of the business. And that was done through prospecting, good lead follow-up, and, going on competitive interviews, right? So if you're going to want to build a business from an earlier part in your career, I would say that the order of prospecting will become extremely important to you. And the order of prospecting would be, what is the process you follow each morning, and what's the order from the lowest hanging fruit to the highest hanging fruit, right? That you follow to make sure you build the most round business you can. And what I'd recommend, if you wanted to know that part, as I would say, call expireds and canceled first, or sell-by owners next. Call around your existing listings and sales. Talk to your past clients and your center of influence, all right? And then build a really strong referral network of people. I refer to them as my inner circle, people that if you talk to them each month and offer some value, they're going to refer business to you every year. And if you follow a process like that, or a variation of that makes sense to you, you're going to win in the end. I tell the story, and I'll keep it very short, but I really sucked on the phone, man, when I first got in this business. I'd have to talk to, oh my gosh, 100+ people to get somebody to finally say yes. And what I lacked in skill, I made up for with effort. And over time, my skills developed, and the amount of time it took me to schedule an appointment started to go down. But that's a commitment. You can't be in this cul-de-sac of complaining about the same problem in your business all the time. And I hear agents do that a lot, too much. What I would do is that I ran into an objection that I didn't have the answer for, I couldn't get good at. I'd write it down. I'd like, okay, this is a problem for me. I'm going to go talk to the 10 people that I can, try to find the best answer for how to handle that. I'm going to practice that answer, and now I won't have that problem anymore. And that could be in presentations over the phone. It could be presentations in person. It could be presentation of the offer. It could be presentation negotiating requests for repairs. I mean, there's all kinds of different areas where I had to get better. But just don't keep repeating the same problem.
I think it's important to shed some light on the fact too that, Josh, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first couple years, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years, was really all phone-based outbound prospecting, and I'm sure it was, and door knocking, and I'm sure it was years later that you really started to sprinkle in, radio, TV, billboards, market, letters, postcards, that sort of thing. But it was really 80-90% phone-based, would you say?
Oh, yeah. And really, if you guys wondering, what was that catalyst that started causing it to shift? It was around the time where I couldn't get to all my past clients and center of influence fast enough anymore. Once I started building a large past client center of influence database, I found that leveraging certain things like the radio, for example, was a good way for me to keep my name in front of my customers in my marketplace. And, without it being too invasive. I was getting repeat and referral business from it. So, but until I had a database of people that knew me, there wasn't a whole lot of value in doing some of those extra things. Or at least I don't think I would have gotten the same return I was getting with it.
Last question for you, Josh. They're asking, what did you do? What kind of system did you set up that you were able to get a 50% referral rate from your past clients?
Well, number one is service. I mean, if everybody's happy with the services that you've offered, and you communicate with them on a quarterly basis after that service has been finalized, you will continue to receive a steady flow of past clients and center of influence. Mine definitely exceeded what most did, but I one thing I will say is I really did it and I really still do it, meaning we still talk to these folks every quarter. And so it really helps us to maintain a relationship with people that we've had these relationships now for 20 years or more now. We are part, when something breaks in someone's home, they don't go to the yellow pages, they call our office.
That's great.
And so that is what you want them thinking. Something's wrong with the house. Call the realtor, honey. Josh probably knows somebody we can have out here. And you gotta become that type of resource for them. I'm thinking about refinancing my house. Call Josh. He'll tell us if we should do that or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it comes down.
Go ahead.
Sorry. It comes down to what you do in like servicing them. Like when there was the wildfires in Reading, you sheltered a bunch of your active and past clients in some of the ones that were affected. And
That's
so
right.
it's not something that you were expecting a return from. It's just you did that because that was what you felt obligated or wanted to help them. So now they're always like, Josh is going to lead us the right direction either way.
It's a mindset.
So that's a big thing too.
Yeah. We were finding places for people to move. They lost their homes. And it's a mindset. It's you recognize that if in the world of real estate, I want the clients that we service in the markets we service in to think of us first. Now, why would they do that? Well, if they're trained by knowing that if something breaks down in my home related to my house, they'll help me. If I have a question financially related to my house, they'll help me. If I have an insurance question related to my house, they'll help me. If I'm thinking about doing some sort of an investment or something like that related to real estate, they'll help me. And you want them, that takes time. You can't just say, oh, I'm here for all these things, and then they start calling you. It takes time. You got to stay committed to that offer, if you will, in your business for the long haul.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially if you're new to the business last 2-3 years, where, those transactions were just coming together with ease, right? Yeah. And you could put up a listing, have to talk to the seller at the listing appointment, and when you negotiate the offers, and then really not have to talk to them till the closing, right? Or even ever again, right? So we were all in a position where you could get deals done by talking to clients 2 or 3 times. And of course, you get a check at the closing, but you're not getting a repeat client because they didn't necessarily feel the value or the relationship. So I think it's just,
well, if you're starving, right, and you go to a restaurant that's less than desirable and they serve you food that doesn't give you food poisoning, you're probably grateful for the meal, but you're not going back.
That's a good example.
And so I think that COVID is an example of, there was a lot of people starving for a home, and you were the person who was willing to answer the phone and go, show them the house and write the contract. That doesn't create a relationship that's long lasting.
It's true.
Yeah. And yeah, that's amazing. Just being conscious of the time. I know, Josh, you're busy, so thank you so much for doing this. This is immensely valuable. What's the best way for someone to reach out to you if they want to collaborate, reach out, send referrals for Reading, California?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, josh@readinghomes.com is a good way to reach me. And then our website is readinghomes.com. So, if you want to get more information about our company and things like that, then it's all there for you.
Yeah. And if you want to learn more about how Josh thinks and his mindset, which I admire greatly, Josh has his own podcast and they are collaborating and potentially doing more. So check that out on Josh's. What's the handle for the podcast on YouTube?
I don't know, man. So That podcast,
we'll add the link. We'll add the link.
So that podcast, just so you guys know,
that's a good problem to have, by the way. You just show up for the filming and
I just show up, and they tell me what I'm doing. Quite honestly, I didn't know that agents watched it. I've only recently discovered that because I thought that it was only for clients in our marketplace. So it turns out that more people are experiencing it than I knew. So whatever it is, Kiro, it's there. Just type it in.
We'll type awesome.
We'll link it below.
Thank you, Josh. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. And this was awesome.
Thank you guys very much. Thanks for everything you guys do. Seriously, I hope that everybody appreciate it as much as we do.
Yeah, man. Well,
absolutely.
Waiting for Dana to tell us we're off. And then that way, curious to know.